just because it's very clear. We're bullish, we're at all-time highs, we've created this high point. We only have that zone to mark off, and then we have on the 4 hour, what I'm gonna do is mark off these lows. Just we're super far away from that. And it looks like we have price reactions around this area which we're at right here, which would be these highs that price created. We had a small pause off that area before breaking above that zone. So we do see those reactions, for example, here, meaning we'll pay attention to that zone, because overall, looking at the daily, looking at the 4 hour, more bullish. The 1 hour is more bullish because we see, for example, whenever you're analyzing price, for those that maybe are newer to understanding market structure, just look at the previous structure points for you to be able to see whether or not that overall bias is still valid. So for example, in this case, we're looking at US30, and we saw that the daily and the 4 hour is more on the bullish side. Looking at the 1 hour, let's say we want to make sure we continue to validate that bias, but we see that price is dropping right now. Ask yourself, okay, where was that high point? Where did that come from? Looking at price action, this, in my opinion, is that real last low point that price created before pushing towards the upside. This is, for me, just a minor pause. I don't think this is a low that price created. So in reality, we're bullish on all time frames on US30, unless we're trading below the 5500s and 20s, 5520s. That's basically it. Because again, this is where that final low got created before we had this strong push that ended up getting priced into this area right here, into our all-time highs, right? But what we're seeing right now and the current momentum off of those highs is clearly pullbacks, right? We're clearly pushing lower against this right here, which is what we see, the bullish, right? We have higher highs, higher lows. This is our higher high. Right now, we're trying to, if anything, create a higher low point. We just have not paused yet, right? So let's take that onto this. I'm gonna mark off this zone as well, which is the 5900s, 50900s. That would be this area right here that I'm pointing out. The only way we see our overall bias continue, which is more on the bullish side and on the 4 hour, is if we get price to reject, maybe give us a nice little double bottom at this area of interest right here, which is what we have, or where we have these highs. If we can reject this area, then what we're doing is retesting a previous area of resistance or a previous structure point. We could be possibly making our support, and we'll see that on the lower time frames. And so if we can stay above, and if we can reject this key area on US30, I would expect for buyers to step in and push price at least into these highs to overall continue more bullish. If not, I would at least want to wait for like another 30-minute candle to close. I would want to see price really get below that zone of interest and then be on the lookout for sells for deeper pullbacks. But I would want to see price action really trading and closing below this key area right here. Because right now momentum is on the seller side, but I personally would not want to chase that market. I wouldn't want to chase sells at this area here unless we have further confirmations, right? Like a more so, even if it's like on the 15-minute. I want to see candles or price create lows for me to really signal that this momentum that we're seeing right here against our overall bias is still valid, and I can look for momentum plays, whether that's breakouts, because when you're looking at US30, such a volatile pair, a lot of times these types of pairs will be good for breakouts, because when you have technical breakouts on pairs, which from what I've seen, like SPX, we've seen it on NAS, we've seen it on US30, a lot of those pairs, when you break certain highs or lows, you do have decent pushes for you to be able to take advantage of quick moves as scalpers in 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. A lot of times you could see that. Versus on gold, although you do have a lot of times strong volume, from my understanding and experience with gold, you have a lot more chances of getting wicked out. A lot more chances of price action maybe breaking a low, but yet still reversing before continuing later on. That's my experience with gold. in comparison to, like, for example, US30. US30, that's why I'm saying right now, I would like to see a candle close below a key area and then further breaks below that zone to really push with that momentum. So US30, that's what we would wait for on the seller side if we're getting below this zone. If not, remember that above, so we're just rejecting, we'd be basically creating an area of support, and then I'd be on the lookout for buys to push price at least into these areas. That's going to be our ideas, our main ideas for US30. Does that make sense, guys, for US30? Do you guys have a similar, let me see what that looks like on the lower time frames. Do you guys have similar analysis to that? Yeah, right now momentum is still on the seller side. I mean, you could see just how strong, even like following this lower time frame structure. So like let's say you have lows, highs, new lows, you have highs, equal lows. So we're still paying attention to these highs right here on the lower time frames. And then you have price action it started to go against that structure a little bit because you started to create new highs, but then you ended up getting to this zone, sold off, still basically same lows. Right now we've broken below these lows, meaning we're creating new lower lows on these lower time frames. That's why I would want to reject this zone, give me a pop above our area, and then give me the retest with the failure to break lower for me to take advantage of a buy. That would be on the buyer's side and what we would want to see above our key area. If not, we'd follow this momentum, we'd wait for price to give us a low, and then we would wait for either the retests to look for further sells or the further breakouts to look for further sells. That would be on US30. So I'm pretty sure that's clear. We'll go back to that as we approach NYSC open, which is in about 15 minutes or so. Call it 60 gold. And then US30 followed through on the sells. Let me just change that here. Which is what we were talking about as well. Which was wait for price or be on the lookout for price to create lows, which in this case, it did it right at market open. At market open, you can see price just had a minor pause before pushing, creating lows for you. And you can see, for example, you had, like I stated earlier, the volume and volatility on like US30 when you have break of highs or lows, for the most part, what I've seen, and we can study this and analyze this ourselves, it is pretty strong. Like you have good breakouts that take place where you could take advantage of very fast move. Here, for example, if you're looking for a break of lows, that was an easy, like 100 pips right here, where price just did that in basically 2 to 3 minutes. Say that was too volatile, or maybe you like to wait for the retest, you got a textbook play of that right here, which was price creating lows, retesting areas of interest, failing to trade above, which is what you got here. You got the low, you got the high, the failure to trade above your area of interest, and then you end up rejecting that area, showing you sellers are still more active and more in control below your area of interest. And you know, as long as you maintain below that zone, the possibility of seeing a retest of these lows increases, and that's what we saw right here. We saw candles failing to trade or really close above, still signaling sellers were more active at this area, no signs of buyers stepping in above the zone. So it was a clean break and retest off that zone, and right now you're still continuing. You have now created new lows, so you can see, for example, the low, the lower high, the low, lower high, another low, meaning momentum is on the seller side. Make sense? Which is against what we were looking for in terms of following the overall bias, which was wait for price to reject this area, create highs for you, retest, and then continuations. Right now you only got the pause and then just the break below. So that invalidated that bullish bias that we had above the 5760s here on US30. So we know we're still more influenced on the seller side. Price is doing just larger and deeper corrections against our overall daily and 4-hour bullish bias there. All right. So guys,